Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast. My name is Jill Foose. I'm a functional medicine and integrative nutrition health coach. I created this podcast to bring you along as we travel down intriguing, science-packed roads, debunking old medical paradigms and perusing new innovative therapies and modalities with the finest functional medicine doctors, practitioners, and like-minded biohackers while living our best life. Enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the Health Trip Podcast. Today, I'm diving into one of my favorite topics to discuss, women's sexual pleasure in midlife. For many women, the menopause transition brings real changes in desire, arousal, and comfort during intimacy. Yet most of us are never taught how to talk about it, let alone how to care for our sexual health as part of our overall well-being. Sexual pleasure is a vital sign of health. It's connected to our hormones, our cardiovascular function, our sleep, our mental health, and even our longevity. But because of stigma, shame, and a lack of open conversation, too many women quietly accept the discomfort, the disconnection, or the belief that this part of their life is over. And it's not. In this episode, my guest and I are breaking down what's really happening to our bodies, how pleasure evolves, and how to reclaim a healthy, fulfilling sex life on our own terms. You often hear me say that we all have a unique health equation, and that includes the pillar of sexual pleasure. There's no one-size-fits-all approach here. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Czar. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and an AASECT certified sex therapist. She holds a Master's of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy from the Family Institute at Northwestern University, a PhD in clinical sexology from Modern Sex Therapy Institute, and certificates in sex therapy and sexuality education from the University of Michigan. Dr. Czar is the clinical director at Avid Intimacy, a sex and relationship therapy private practice in Chicago. So before we dive in, just a short medical disclaimer. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice or to make any lifestyle changes to treat any medical condition in yourself or others. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. And this entire disclaimer also applies to any of my guests on my podcast. So sit back, open your minds, and let's dig into sexual pleasure in midlife. Hi, Dr. Czar. Welcome to the Health Trip Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited for you to be here too, because I love talking about sexual health, function, and pleasure with midlife women because we do not talk about it enough.
Indeed, I love it as well.
Yeah. And so you're an AASECT certified sex therapist with a PhD in clinical sexology. And many people don't even know what those credentials mean or what kind of support a professional like you would provide. And so I thought we'd start off the podcast with you explaining exactly what a sex therapist does. What would the expectations be if someone went to you? And how would someone know it's the right time to go seek someone out like you?
I'm so glad you asked because there are a lot of depictions of sex therapy on TV and in the media that are just not accurate. And the important thing to know about sex therapy is it's just talk therapy. All we're doing, just as you might do with a general therapist, is sitting in the room, talking about your sex life, exploring together, being co-detectives about what's going on, and coming up with actual solutions that you will do at home in the privacy of your bedroom, not in the space with a sex therapist. Sex therapy can be individual therapy or couples therapy. So it really depends on the nature of your issue and how comfortable you are bringing a partner into the space. A lot of folks who come into sex therapy aren't partnered at all, and we welcome those folks as well. But I guess the indicator of when you should see a sex therapist is when you start considering seeing a sex therapist. That if you're thinking about it, especially if you're in therapy already and you're feeling not quite comfortable bringing your sexual issues into the room, or that the clinician you're seeing doesn't really have solutions for you, The difference between any other therapist who may be sex positive and may be a safe person to talk about sex with and an ASEX certified sex therapist is that we've had a lot of specialized training, not just in how to hold the space for your sexual concerns, but
Mhm.
actually about what helps, and we can offer you real solutions.
Yeah, I think that's really important because there's a lot of women, a lot of couples out there really struggling in this area of their life and in their relationship. And just knowing that there's help out there. I always talk about building your healthcare team in midlife and beyond. And who are the people you want sitting at your team, at your table, your board of directors table? And,
Mhm.
a sex therapist or a therapist, someone to help you in this pillar of life. And, sexual pleasure is a pillar. It's there to help us enjoy life, feel good about ourselves. It has direct positive effects on our heart health, our brain health,
Mhm.
so many things. It's beyond the bedroom.
Exactly. It's really just investing in yourself, in your
Yeah.
pleasure, in the future of your relationship and your body. And there's so much potential there. And the truth is, we're not taught this stuff. When we don't get
Right.
sex education, nobody tells us what to expect as we enter into midlife and aging and menopause. There's no instruction manual. Now there are a few, but we
Hmm.
probably didn't get them in the same way that we might have gotten a puberty book. So it's
Right.
really important that we stay curious about ourselves, and there's no shame in outsourcing if you're feeling stuck.
Absolutely. So, from your perspective as a sex therapist, how does the midlife transition, including perimenopause and postmenopause, the hormonal shifts we're experiencing, our
Mhm.
relationship changes, reshape a woman's sexual experience?
Mhm. The short answer is it depends. There's a really wide range in how midlife and beyond can impact the way that we're thinking about and engaging with our sexuality. For many, the process of getting older invites this like refocus on our health and on our bodies. It invites more free time, right? Depending on your life path, there's a point at which there is no free time, and then opening up, where maybe kids are out of the house, or winding down in careers where, okay, you have all this free time to actually refocus. For a lot of others, however, this shift means living in a body that you're not quite familiar with.
Mhm.
Hormone levels start to go down, which impacts the way that our bodies, I mean, our estrogen receptors are everywhere in our bodies. So
Mhm.
when we get that swift drop during perimenopause and ultimately that zeroing out at menopause, yeah, it's going to affect everything in your body, including libido, arousal, orgasm, um, sensitivity. These are all things that we need to be aware of so that we can work with them. But the important note that I want to make here is that a lot of folks have a sense of kind of doom and gloom about sexuality as you age, and that's not the rule. In fact, if you're intentional about it and stay curious about yourself, this can really be an opportunity to re-engage and reinform your sexuality in a really beautiful and empowered way.
So you mentioned kids out of the house and
Mhm.
how that could maybe connect with redefining your sexual pleasure. And this is the interesting thing. When my kids left the house and they've been gone for a while, and I'm been divorced for almost,
Mhm.
8 or 9, 10 years, whatever it is, and I have a new partner, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be great. The kids are all going to be gone, and I'm going to be able to have it, all this sex wherever I want, whenever I want. And then you get there and you're postmenopausal and you're like, huh, yeah, so that's not what I actually want right now. And how am I going to redefine this, recreate, and rebuild my sexual pleasure toolkit?
Mhm. It's such a good point because for so many folks, there's this idea of like coming back to your sexuality and noticing it's like coming back home and noticing that all the furniture has been rearranged.
Yeah.
Like, this just doesn't feel like my home anymore. This isn't comfy and cozy. And all the ways I used to get around my house don't work for me anymore. I keep running into things. So there needs to be, especially if you're engaging with a new partner or with a new life phase, a lot of curiosity and permission to reacclimate or even rearrange the furniture so that it better
Mhm.
suits your needs.
Yeah. So last year you worked on the Sex After 60 survey with the Kinsey Institute. I want to know what surprised you most in women's stories of sexual satisfaction later in life.
Mhm. I'll be honest with you, Jill. I wasn't that surprised because I'd been working with women who
Mm,
were,
makes
and
sense.
I see a biased sample, right? I see the women who come to me and say, this is a priority. This is something that's important to me, or it's important to my relationship. And I want to focus on continuing to be sexual as I age or coming back to sexuality now. And what we saw in that study was that, yes, there's a huge drop off in the number of folks that are continuing to engage in sexuality as they age. But for the folks that continue to make it a priority and continue to come back to sex and get curious and reinvent their sex lives as they age, they actually report that sex gets better with age. There's a lot of hopeful things going on there. And that's what I've been seeing in my practice, that for the folks who had decided that this was a priority in their life, and once we worked past a lot of the shame or the other constraints that were holding folks back, the medical issues that, of course, needed to be addressed, it became this play space for reinventing and rediscovering and really re-empowering ourselves to create a more selfish, and I use selfish as a good thing, more
Mhm.
self-focused, more about pleasure than about performance. And all of this showed up in the research as well, that for the folks who really wants to make it a priority, there's so much opportunity to, yes, it looks different, and we can talk more about how it looks different. But difference doesn't have to mean, again, that like doom and gloom, that there's a lot of positive motion here. And there's a lot of really beautiful medical research and solutions in the medical realm that actually make sex not just possible, but pleasurable as we age. We just need to know where to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of questions in there. One is,
Mhm.
what do you think was the biggest difference between those two different groups? The group that made this intentional decision that they wanted to continue on and experience sexual pleasure, and it's going to look different, and I'm interested in what that is from you, versus the other group that was sort of not moving forward,
Mhm.
not feeling curious about it.
Sure, sure. And the big difference there is, listen, is sex possible as you age? Can sex be pleasurable and get better as you age? Yes. Is it mandatory? No. So the real question I have for that former group who's saying, it's just not on the list right now. It's not something that's important to me. It's not really relevant to my life or my relationships. Maybe I'm partnered and my partner doesn't want it all that much either. Um, or maybe I'm unpartnered and I've never been a big masturbator, so it's not really impacting me all that much. My big question is, are you distressed by it? Right? If you're not distressed by it, it's not a problem. Right? If you are distressed by it and you want something to change, okay, we've got solutions. But not being interested in sex or not making sex a priority isn't a problem in and of itself. There are lots of folks whose sex is the top of their priority list. And I mean, I'm a big fan of sex. I'm a sex therapist, for heaven's sakes, but I'm not in the interest of, or I'm not in the business of forcing people to have sex who don't otherwise want to or who aren't distressed by lack of sex. Um, so the group that I'm really interested in and tend to see most often are the folks who sex has been deprioritized or it's not feeling all that good, but they're distressed by it or they want
Mm.
it to change. And that's who comes into my office. And those are the folks where there's just so much potential to work with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, what are you referring to when you say sexual pleasure may look different in midlife and beyond?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, there are the real medical, physical, physiological changes that can
Hmm.
happen as we age. And some of this is menopause related, some of it's just aging. Our bodies change, our body shapes change, the functionality of different parts of our bodies will change. And some of this is vulvar and vaginal, some of it's just like, okay, my hips don't flop open as wide as they
Hmm.
used to, right? Or like I can't sit in that position for quite as long. But when it comes to vulvar and vaginal health, we see a lot of impacts with both aging and with loss of estrogen during the menopause transition. Um, we'll talk a little bit about pain later, but sexual pain certainly comes up. Dryness, it might take a little bit longer or a lot longer to get to a point of arousal, to be lubricated enough, and for the vaginal walls to get stretchy enough to allow, if you're interested in penetrative sex and intercourse, might take longer to get to a point where that's possible and pleasurable. Your orgasm might not come as quickly. Our nerve endings tend to change with lack of estrogen, um, where when we're younger, our clitoral nerve endings are more sensitive to soft touch. That tends to be one of the types of touch that feels best to our vulva and our clitoris. As we age, we might need some more intensity. Those nerve endings that respond to vibration last longer. So those tend to stay intact even when the other nerve endings are kind of weathered down. Um, we also see a lot of shifts just in the nature of play that folks tend to be interested in fantasy, that folks tend to shift towards more of a focus on sensuality, connection, both based on necessity, of course, and on what feels pleasurable. Things tend to slow down a little bit. Like they might not be as impact focused, as kinky. This is a trend, not a rule, by the way. I know
Hmm.
lots of kinky folks and have worked with lots of kinky
Hmm.
folks of all ages. Um, but we do see a shift towards more sensuality, more of what I call an inside out experience of sex. So, more focused on what feels good to my body as opposed to an outside in perspective of sex. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is a focus on performance. Things like how lubricated am I? How erect is my partner's penis if you're having sex with someone with a penis? How quick can we get to orgasm? How many orgasms can we have? Our attention tends to shift, again, partially because of necessity and partially because it's what tends to feel good, towards just experiencing sex as pleasure focused, more of a mindful experience, more focused on connection and less concerned with what does my body look like and how is it showing up to the party.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is women are feeling more empowered to take time and be more mindful about the deep connection, how they're
Mhm.
feeling, what works for them. But I think getting there is the hard part,
Sure.
right? Getting from A to Z is where a lot of women, in my experience of talking to them and just my coaching practice, where they get stuck, where they have these old thoughts about, masturbation is wrong, using sex toys are wrong, certain positions are dirty, uh,
Mhm.
things like that. How could women reframe all of that to their benefit?
Sure. You bring up such a good point, Jill, which is that one of the main indicators that tells us whether someone's going to have a great sex life in midlife and beyond is how good was your sex life actually before?
Yeah.
And what we see is I mean, you're talking about folks that had some real constraints to being self-focused and pleasure-focused. And there's often a lot of shame, stigma, reservation in the way that especially folks who were socialized as women approach sex. Um, and what happens when we're young and everything's hormones and our vaginas get wet really quickly is that we can get away with it. We can get away with things rather that we then can't get away. You can't get away with bad sex after menopause. You just cannot. You can get away with bad sex in your 20s. So, if someone's reporting that they have a lot of shame around masturbation, that there's something that prevents them from just truly saying, you know what? Sex, why are we having sex after menopause anyway? We're not trying to make babies, right?
Hmm.
We're having sex for fun, for
Right.
play. And when folks are saying that there's some unwritten rule or restriction or shame that's getting in the way of having sex in a way that's just, I'm going to do whatever I feel like and whatever feels good with my body and I'm going to smush my body together with my partner's body in whatever ways feel great. If there's stuff getting in the way, then it sounds like there was work to do all along, that now there's just a little more imperative behind it.
Yeah, I could see as a postmenopausal woman, I can see how just my kids being out of the house, I have more space to think about my sexual pleasure and my
Right.
experience. I'm not caught up in my head with a lot of kid things. I have
Mhm.
other things in my head, but
Of course.
so yes, freeing up some space really does kind of force you to dial in and say and ask the questions, be curious and decide, do you want to do something about this or not? I wrote a note down for when you were talking about nerve endings and how
Mm-hmm.
they dull in our clitoris and our vulva area. And when I share that with women, they take such a nice sigh, like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not doing anything wrong. This is just part of aging and physiology. And I think somewhere along the road, I also heard that some women have a preferred side of their labia that has maybe more sensitivity than the other. And maybe they discover that through masturbation or through partnered play or through using a vibrator, which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Vibrators and masturbation are, well, vibrators, there are FDA approved vibrators for sexual pleasure and function and
Mm-hmm.
health.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
when
sometimes it helps folks to not think of them as toys, but as tools.
tools,
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
And masturbation is also something that physicians are going to tell you, a well-versed physician is going
Right.
to tell you to consider, right? Get the
Yes.
mirror out, look down there, get to know your vulva and your clitoris and your
Mhm.
labia and the whole thing.
Exactly. And it's this kind of thing where folks tend to be surprised by that. It's one of the first things that I tell people. They're asking me all these questions about their vulva and sexual functioning. And really, the big one is, am I normal? Is this shift normal? And I'll say to folks, well, when was the last time you took a look? Like, can you identify all of the parts of your vulva? Do you know what
Um,
she looks like? Do you know, to your point about my labia are different and they're probably different sizes and they've got different grooves to them and they'll have different sensitivity. Do you know your labia? Do you know your clitoris? What angle feels best for you to approach your clitoris? What level of sensitivity? How does that change as you get more aroused? And you mentioned this word, and it's like the key to all of this is just curiosity.
mhm.
We expect, we have these weird, or they're not so weird because they're so baked into our culture, this idea that sex is supposed to be spontaneous and it's natural. And if you have to think about it, then it's not good. Or if you have to plan it, then it's not good. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Like everything that we're doing with our body, whether it's exercise or sleep or sex, the more we get to know and the more we can get curious about what actually works for us, the more options we'll have for getting the results that we want. Um, and I think to your point about vibrators, I have worked with a lot of women who are, it's never too late to start using a
Yeah.
vibrator, who this change in sensitivity over time, or even losing access to a partner, whether that's through divorce or death, or a partner who has also lost interest in sex, um, gives us this opportunity to explore the world of sex toys and masturbation and really form a, an authentic sexual relationship with ourselves. And again, I say this over and over again that the folks who are having the best sex are the folks who are having selfish sex, who go
Mhm.
into a situation saying, I know my body, I know what I like. We can be selfish and still consider others. Sometimes, especially women, aren't taught that you're allowed to be selfish, that you're allowed to be self-focused, especially women who are having sex with men, that sex is not just for men. right? It's for you,
Yep.
and your partner is responsible for their own pleasure and their own orgasm, and you are responsible for yours.
That's such a good point because I think there are still many women out there who feel dependent that it's their man's job, their partner's job to uh, figure their body out and make it work and get them to orgasm. Um, and that's just not true. In fact, my daughter is 29 now, and when she
Mhm.
was going away as a freshman to college, I brought her a vibrator. I bought her
Mm,
first vibrator, and I said, "Listen, if you don't figure out what's going to make you feel wonderful and how to reach an orgasm, no guy's going to figure it out. You need to figure it out for
mm,
yourself, and then you need to tell him how to help you if you're with him." And she
exactly.
was so excited. She was like, "Great. Wow. Okay."
Yeah, I bet she was the only one in the dorm that had a mother that gifted her a
Totally.
vibrator.
Right. Everyone else is buying like a bottle of like vodka. I'm buying a vibrator.
Like both essential for the first year of college.
Yes, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
no, but it is. It's such, and it's so lovely that you're offering that message at an early age because and this is regardless of age, regardless of life stage, that the
Yeah.
things that we see that make people good in bed, quote unquote, are not skills or experience. It's communication.
Yeah.
Right? Can you talk to a partner? Can you collaborate with a partner about what feels best for your body? Because the truth is, it doesn't matter how many skills we have with one partner, it's not going to translate to our next partner because our bodies are vastly different from each other and the things that turn us on and the pleasures. I mean, human sexuality is wide and varied, and it varies as much as our imaginations vary. So we need to be talking to our partners and having that conversation with ourselves, as you said, in
Yeah.
order to get there.
Yeah. Something you had quoted in the Sex After 60 survey was about um, it was about fantasy and imagination and eroticism.
Hmm.
And you said something like you were encouraging those looking for inspiration to explore the world of erotica. It's
Hmm.
expanded exponentially where there are options not from the male lens. They are feminist and ethical and include real bodies and folks of all ages. And I love that because there's nothing dirty about erotica. We now have apps, we have audiobooks, we have women centric porn, and
Hmm.
people still feel so uncomfortable entering into these worlds where it could be something new and exciting and help them in their area of sexual pleasure.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's something, especially when folks, their bodies are changing and they're so focused on sexual functioning and get my body to work. But it doesn't matter if you learn how to touch your body correctly, quote unquote, correctly, or in a way that works for your body, if your brain isn't turned on. Like we need to activate the arousal in our brain, in our nervous system. And that happens by being in a sexual context. Sometimes that looks like the sexiest thing in the world is happening right in front of you, so you don't have to use your imagination or fantasize. But more often than not, let's be honest, you've just gotten home from a stressful day and your teenage kids are downstairs making noise and your partner's kind of been stressing you out, but you know that it's important for your relationship and for your body and you like having sex once you do it. So again, you are responsible for turning yourself on, for getting into that sexy mindset. What better way than with imagination or to outsource, to use all of the varied material that's out there? And a lot of folks have a real stigma against erotica in general, especially porn. There are a lot of problems in the porn industry
Yeah.
when things aren't done ethically. And there are solutions to that problem. There is erotica that doesn't involve any real people if that's something that bothers you. That's um, sexual novels, erotic fiction, um, drawings, audio erotica, which is, there are still real people there reading scripts, but they're not actually having sex. It's just reading scripts. And I found that with a lot of women, especially turning to audio erotica, is really the way to go, especially for folks that tend to go into like comparison mode with other people's bodies or have concerns about porn that they can't really get invested into it. Or let's be honest, there's again a trend, not a rule, that men tend to be a little bit more visual in what turns them on, and
Mhm.
women tend to rely more on imagination and other sensations. So again, it's just about curiosity about yourself. And if there is shame or a stigma that's getting in the way of you accessing erotica, get curious about it.
Yeah, what would be some baby steps into this world for a woman who's curious, but she's never looked at anything, heard anything? Um, what would be some beginner steps for her?
Uh-huh. One of the fun things that I'll do with folks in therapy is just explore what is already in your life. What are you already consuming that
Mm,
kind of turns you on? Because most folks have a book that they've read with, it doesn't have to be
right.
erotica for there to be a sexy or romantic or sexual scene or a show that they've watched. There's like that scene in Bridgerton that you
Mhm.
watch over and over and over again. So come back to what you already know and then explore for yourself, what is it about that I really liked? Was it the romance? Was it a specific sexual or intimate act? Was it the power dynamic? That's often a big part of it. Like, what was sexy about that to me? Because then what you've given yourself in just that exploration, those are your search words, right? Whether you're searching for porn or a new novel to read or a new TV show, um, look into that because there are, again, sexual fantasies are as wide as the human imagination, and there's no reason to limit yourself here.
I really love that stuff because it's grounded in positive psychology, which is what health
Mhm.
coaches use. What's already going well for you? What's already
Right.
intuitive? What's the low-hanging fruit? And grab that and associate how you feel with doing whatever that is and build on top of that. So I never really thought about it that way, but it's genius. It's such a great idea.
Yeah, most folks will have something to pull on,
Yeah.
and it can be a really fun exercise.
Yeah. So I recently came across this 2025 study that explored how women name their genitalia. I don't know if you saw this,
Mhm. I saw
but
it once you drew my attention to it, so I've,
okay,
I've
yeah.
now read it.
Yeah, so it showed that women who use playful childish names for their genitals, such as like vajayjay or hoo-hoo, were associated with negative self-image, and vulgar names such as pussy were linked to more increased sexual pleasure, higher orgasm rates, and higher desire for oral sex. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh my goodness, Joel. It's such an interesting study, and I
Mhm.
hadn't seen it before, but there's nothing about this that surprises me. When we
Really?
when we think about vajayjay, oh, it's like it gives me the ick just to think about it. This idea of like vajayjay or hoo-ha, your lady
Mhm.
parts, you're down there. It's all shrouded in shame, right?
Yeah.
Vajayjay tells you we can't say vagina, we can't say vulva. It's implied that there's something that's like dirty or icky or yucky, and we can't um we can't even talk about it without making it childish. And there's nothing childish about sex. Sex is for adults.
Mm.
And so it
Mhm.
doesn't surprise me that the more vulgar using words that adults say is sexier, right? And yes, to some folks saying the word vagina and vulva isn't the sexiest thing. But if we have words that feel empowering, and the word in this study is vulgar, but like I'd say sexy, right? Like
Yeah,
sexy.
totally.
And it's actually an exercise that I do with clients all the time is to talk about what are we calling your genitals? Because it's another thing that you cannot assume with a partner what they want their genitals to be called. And if you're in a sexual act and you hear your partner call your genitals something that you don't like, whether that's because it's like childish or like shame loaded, like, "Oh, I'm gonna touch your vajayjay," it's like, ugh. But and for a lot of folks, some of those more vulgar words may be triggering or might bring them back
Right.
to past experiences that they don't like. And if you ask folks, what do you want your body parts called? They will generally have an answer. And that's a really good thing to know about your partner because, again, we need context. We need the things that are happening around us to be sexy, and we need communication. And if you're talking about what you want with your partner, you got to be using words that feel affirming and authentic and sexy and erotic. So it makes sense to me that these words matter.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I want to pivot to talking about genitopelvic pain issues. This is something I've actually never covered on my podcast before, and I
Hmm.
know you specialize in genitopelvic pain.
Hmm.
Um, and you said that around 75% of women may experience this at some point. So,
Hmm.
can you explain what these are? Because some women may not even know that they have one of these issues. They might not know
Right.
what it's called, what if there's something they can do about it. They might just be living in absolute misery here.
Hmm. Yes, this is one of the things that I'm most passionate about and that I want to spread the word with because painful sex is not okay. It is never okay. And a lot of folks are not taught that. In fact, we get a lot of messages to the contrary that sex is just supposed to hurt for women. And even that idea that, like, the first time you have sex, it hurts
Right.
really, really bad. That's not true. It shouldn't. Um, and that, intercourse just doesn't feel all that good for women. And what do we expect? And it's supposed to be uncomfortable. We get these messages all the time, and they just couldn't be further from the truth. I do want to clarify that statistic. 75% of women, that is a really big percentage, obviously. That is more about like a one-time or short-term experience of painful sex. It's
Hmm.
still not okay if sex hurts. My suggestion is to stop doing it. You don't want to teach your body that that's what sex feels like. When we look at the statistics for folks who have a long-lasting, chronic, pervasive sexual pain disorder or something that's long-lasting, the numbers there are closer to 1 in 4. Um, 1 in 5, newer research says 1 in 4 because it is underreported, unfortunately, because so many folks
Yeah.
think that it's normal. Um, and this is not okay. This means that something's wrong. This is, I'll say all the time, no matter how you're having sex, it's normal because sex is play and it's as wide as our imagination. Painful sex is not normal. Unwanted painful sex is not normal. Are there ways that you can incorporate pain into sex and that can be perfectly normal? Absolutely. But if it's not what you're going for, it's not okay and there are real solutions. So if you've been to, I would recommend seeing a medical specialist to see what's going on physically, physiologically. If you're in pain when you have intercourse or external touch and you have a physician who says, well, everything's normal, um, get a second opinion. It is not normal, and there are real medical solutions that can be, I cannot tell you, and there's been recent research about the way that women are gaslit by clinicians around the fact that there's nothing that can be done and sex just hurts sometimes and everything looks normal to me. Even just have a glass of wine or try to relax. Oh my goodness, it's awful the things that folks have heard. Sex should not hurt. When it
So,
comes,
what? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I think I was just going to answer your next question, which is what is actually going on here?
Yeah.
When it comes to chronic painful sex, there are a lot of things under that umbrella. The word that you'll hear a lot is dyspareunia, which
Mhm.
basically it's the medical diagnosis that just means painful sex. It tells you absolutely nothing about the causes of this pain, why it's there, or what to do about it. It's kind of the first line diagnosis. When we narrow in, we get terms like vulvodynia, which just means painful vulva. And they're basically that's pain that exists on your vulva. So that's anything external, any part. all the parts that your underwear touches, including, and this is the most common place where you'll see pain is with penetration, is right at the vaginal opening, which is called vestibulodynia. That's the vaginal vestibule that causes, that is painful. What
And
you'll, Mhm. No, 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 ask your question.
so with the black box warning
Mm-hmm.
being taken off of different menopause hormone therapy products, including vaginal estrogen,
Mm-hmm.
is that something that would help this type of pain, the vulvodynia pain?
It is, as long as the vulvodynia pain is due to changes in the vulva and vagina due to lack of estrogen. So, what happens after menopause when estrogen levels go to zero is that all of the estrogen receptors that our vulva and vagina rely on to do all the things that it needs to do, like lubricate, stretch, really impacts the tissue of the vulva and vagina. Um, this is, by the way, what this is called is genital urinary syndrome of
Mhm.
menopause. So that's the name for what happens when estrogen goes away. It used to be called vaginal atrophy, which is a terrible name, which is why they changed it. Um, but what you can experience is kind of a myriad of symptoms, including pain with penetration. But it's vaginal dryness, itching, burning, irritation. You may see the labia or the clitoris shrink. Um, you'll experience changes in the tissue. And this is where folks don't know a whole lot, or they don't tend to, about let me say that again, about what menopausal hormone therapy looks like, because there are two broad umbrellas. One is systemic, which helps us with the estrogen receptors all throughout our body, and one is local. It can be a cream or gel or suppository that goes directly to the tissue in the vulva or vagina. And what happened was that due to a lot of outdated research, it's very complicated, that made us scared that systemic estrogen was leading to cancer, or wasn't appropriate for folks who were at high risk for cancer. This has largely been changed, rewritten, updated. So have a nuanced conversation with your doctor whenever you're going into hormone therapy, because you might be a candidate, even if you've been told that you're not. But what happened was this black box label got put also onto local estrogen, even though there was no research that indicated that local estrogen that was not systemic, that did not go into your bloodstream throughout your body, that just went directly to the tissue in your vulva and vagina, it got linked when it shouldn't have. So what this black box removal does is it basically says, hey, a lot of folks who may have been scared to use that vulvovaginal estrogen prior may want to reconsider that, because the FDA is now saying what it should have been saying all along, which is that this is actually very safe. Also important to note that there are non-hormonal options. If you're still saying, I don't want to add hormones to my body, you can apply DHEA, which is another option that's non-hormonal that also treats GSM. So if you haven't been offered options, get them. GSM is highly, highly treatable. I worked for a long time in the Center for Sexual Medicine at Northwestern, where we treated folks with vulvas and vaginas who had sexual functioning issues. GSM was one of those things that the physicians could confidently say, and doctors never say this, but doctors can confidently say, I can treat this. 100%, we have solutions for this. Doctors never say that. They say that for this. There are solutions out there. And unlike other types of estrogen therapy where there's a critical window, that like if you miss that window, it's not as
Yeah.
effective, and the risk reward ratio can shift. That's not as true for local vaginal vulvar estrogen. Important to note that you don't just want to treat the vagina, you want to treat the whole vulva, your clitoris, all of those things topical estrogen and DHEA can help with.
I always say to women, you wouldn't go to bed without putting all your moisturizer and whatever else, your serums and whatever else you're doing to your face. you have to think of your vagina and your vulva in the same way.
Yes. Yes, and it's such an important point too that vaginal moisturizers, right?
Mhm.
Just as you're moisturizing that skin on your face, you need to be doing it for your vulva and vagina as well. And lubricants and moisturizers are different things. Lubricants you use just when you're planning on having sex. Moisturizers are every day, just as you would do the rest of your body.
Exactly. And we don't have to wait for a 911. We can be preventative in this approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So circling back to vulvodynia,
Mhm.
you said it depends. When I asked you if vaginal estrogen would help with that, you said it depends if that's the reason why this woman has vulvodynia. What would be another reason that she has this?
Sure. So some vulvodynia is hormonally mediated. Other reasons that you could have it are an infection, a
Mm,
physiological difference. For example, some folks they have what's called an imperforate hymen, which means that their hymen is too thick or too tough to get anything through. You could have
mm,
adhesions on your clitoris that may cause vulvodynia. It can also be a nerve issue. A lot of times there's um, even neuroproliferative vulvodynia is something that you're born with that impacts the nerve endings around your vulva. Folks can also have vulvar skin conditions, things like lichen sclerosus or dermatitis on the vulvar skin that could impact vulvodynia, all kinds of things. Again, this is why it's so important to see a specialist because there are so many reasons. That term, vulvodynia, tells you almost nothing. It just describes the pain. The other thing that's important to note is that there are two types of dyspareunia. One is that vulvar or pain with entry, and the other is that deep pain that's either with thrusting or with deep penetration. That would not be in the vulvodynia category. That's deeper into the vagina. What we call vaginismus is when the vaginal muscles, the pelvic floor muscles, spasm. The thing about vaginismus is that that can often happen secondary to other things. So if you have GSM, for example, and that skin is brittle and not lubricated enough and not really stretchy, and you try to insert something into the vagina, your vagina is not stupid. It's going to say, no, thank you. And what's going to happen, those vaginal muscles are going to clamp down to say, please do not enter. If you do that enough over time, those muscles learn that response. That's a trauma
mm,
response in the body. So you might get what's called a hypertonic pelvic floor, which is a tight pelvic floor that maintains over time. This also happens to folks who just tend to hold a lot of tension in their body or hold their stress in their pelvic floor, right? Some folks hold it in their shoulders, some folks hold it
mm,
in their pelvis. Or you might get vaginismus, which is more of a spasm. So if you notice that in anticipation of intercourse or upon intercourse, everything just goes, nope, no, thank you. This can literally feel like a brick wall. Nothing's getting in there, and it can be excruciatingly painful. So important to note that pelvic floor muscles are a really important piece of the puzzle. Regardless of where your pain started, they tend to get involved. And that's why you mentioned having a really good treatment team, having a pelvic floor physical therapist
mm.
on your team, just as if you hold your tension in your shoulders, you need a physical therapist to help you work out that muscle tension. If it's in your pelvic floor, there are physical therapists who specialize in working with those muscles and helping you find relief and get more control over the release and contract of those muscles. And please, 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 if you have a tight pelvic floor, don't do Kegels. The last thing you need is to tighten those muscles more.
Mm.
And that's what Kegels do. Work with a professional, learn exercises that are made for your specific body.
So you mentioned that possibly a woman who has a tightened pelvic floor, maybe she's holding trauma in there.
Mhm.
And I could see the pelvic floor therapist is part of that equation to help her. But what is the other emotional part? Like, how do you work with the woman on the emotional part when she has
Mhm.
stored trauma, stored sexual trauma?
Mhm. First of all, it feels important to define what trauma is. Trauma
Mhm.
is a traumatic event can be an acute one-time thing or a chronic past experience that has hijacked our nervous system. and rewired it. So what that means is that otherwise neutral stimuli may be coded as danger to our body. So our body responds with a defensive mechanism. And this can look, when it comes to sexuality, it can look a lot of different ways. It can mean dissociating from the experience, not being present in the room or in your body. It might be a heightened anxiety or fear, even anger, muscle tension. Um, Trauma doesn't need to be sexual in nature to impact our sex lives. But if your trauma is sexual in nature, if you've been the victim of sexual violence, there will likely be a lot of things that are sexually relevant that impact your trauma response. So you may get a lot of reminders of that traumatic experience while you're trying to have a pleasurable sexual experience. So the first step whenever it comes to addressing trauma is just really understanding what it is so that you can breed self-compassion, be kind to your body and your nervous system about what it's doing. Important to note that not everybody who has sexual pain has a history of trauma. That's kind of a misnomer that gets out there. Also important to note that the experience of having painful sex for a long time is traumatic. Your
Hmm.
nervous system will remember that. So if folks have been having painful sex, especially if it started at a young age and they've been toughing through it, their body is learning that sex is not safe. And that can look like vaginismus, right? That's your vagina saying this is not safe, defense mechanisms go. Or it can look like dissociation, anxiety, dysregulation in your body when you're trying to have sex. Pleasure, orgasm, all rely on safety, on being present in our body, on being able to let go and really stop scanning for danger. So investigating the trauma response, being compassionate to yourself through trauma, helping a partner, having a partner that's curious about helping you create safety in the space can all be really, really imperative. And it's a lot of the more intensive therapy or deeper work that we're doing in sex therapy.
Yeah, I've talked to many women who've gone through divorce who, in their first marriage, maybe had sexual pain associated with, abuse. Maybe it was emotional abuse or whatever it was. And they struggle, but are curious with their new
Mhm.
partner to come back to a place of homeostasis where they can experience that deep connection, that sexual pleasure, maybe an orgasm, even just for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely possible. This is the thing is that we can't trick our body into feeling safe. But if we are in new, safe contexts, just as our nervous systems got misinformed by bad or traumatic sexual experiences, they can be reinformed by new, safer experiences. So our nervous systems are super plastic, and there is so much space and potential for coming back and re-embracing and re-engaging in a safe, sexual, pleasurable, erotic, orgasmic sexual experience.
Yeah, Dr. Czar, that is just such an important message for women to hear over and over again. We
Mhm.
talk about how menopause is not the end of the road.
Oh,
It presents opportunities to us, and this is just one opportunity. And it's, as you keep saying over and over again, it's about staying curious and open-minded and being intentional.
yes, exactly. Exactly. And with a lens towards the future, I hear so many folks say to me, I just want to get back to the past.
Mhm.
And that's not a direction that we get to go. But if you can open up your mind and your heart and your body to the potential of the future, you're just going to have a much better, playful, more erotic time.
Absolutely. You spoke earlier about spontaneous desire or spontaneous sex, sort of this
Mhm.
Hollywood spark, and you rip clothes off, and the next scene is you guys are, not that anyone really smokes too much anymore, but something like that,
The
right?
postcoital cigarette, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
totally, right.
Uh-huh.
And this is something that I also try to talk about with women is the spontaneous desire versus responsive desire. And I would love for you to expand on that because I think it's really important that women are aware that they can rebuild their sexual pleasure toolkit. You've already mentioned different ways, but go over what those two are and what
Sure.
responsive desire might look like in a woman who's in midlife or beyond.
Yes, it's such an important point, and I'm glad you brought it up because for so many folks, they think of themselves as being low libido. And
Yeah.
that's actually not true. More often, what happens is they just have, probably have always had, but may shift more with aging to a responsive desire. What that means basically is that spontaneous desire is that kind of lightning bolt to the genitals. All I can think about sex, and it came out of nowhere. Basically, that the wanting sex comes before the pleasure, the liking sex. What responsive desire means is that the liking, the pleasure, the enjoyment comes before the desire. So you need to be doing something sexual, whether that's really connecting on an emotional level with a partner, whether it's watching that scene in Bridgerton, whether it's getting a kiss on the neck that feels really good in order to start to fire up the engine that will then get you into a place of, okay, now I want something more sexual, more explicit, more erotic. Not only is this a really, really normal and the most common way to experience sexual desire, it's also something that as we age, we need to know about because we need to be intentional about engaging our desire systems if we want to prioritize it. The other thing to remember is that as men age, if we're having sex with men, they do tend to shift more towards a responsive desire as well. And what
Hmm.
often happens is that all of those memories that we have of spontaneous sex may have been engaged by our partner that had more of a spontaneous desire for sex and now no longer does. The other really
Except the ones that might be taking testosterone replacement therapy,
Well, sure. And
right?
remembering too that testosterone isn't something that just men lose, that,
Right.
that we, not necessarily with menopause, but with aging, women
Yeah.
also, their testosterone levels go down
Yep.
with age. But the thing that I also talk to people about a lot is that the spontaneous sex that you're remembering might not actually have been as spontaneous as you think
Hmm.
it is. Like, I have a lot of folks who will say, well, when we weren't living in the same place and we were only seeing each other 3 times a week, it was always spontaneous. No, it wasn't. What were you doing prior to going on a date with your partner? You were getting all dolled up. You were making sure that you smelled
Yeah.
nice. You were imagining the date that you would go on. You see them and instantly it's kissing and touching. You're expecting to have sex, so you're thinking about sex. Everything you're doing there is foreplay, is stirring up that responsive desire. And really, what you're talking about there is planned intentional sex. I ask folks all the time, what happens in your life right now, even the most fun things that you do that you don't plan for? Well, we'll go out to dinner. Okay. Do you make a reservation? Yeah, Jen, if we want to go to the good restaurant, we tend to make a reservation. I'm in Chicago. You've got to make a
Hmm.
reservation. Okay. Does that change how much you enjoyed it because you planned it in advance? No, right? Everything in our lives, especially as we get older and busier and we have more stressors in our life, everything that we're doing, especially the just for fun stuff, we are scheduling. So I really invite folks to get past this idea that sex has to be spontaneous or in order to be good and sexy. Put it on your calendar, prepare for it, get excited for it in the same way that you would get excited for dinner at your favorite restaurant. And when you show up, if it's something that you like and that is fun, right? If you enjoy the taste of the food at this restaurant, you will be present at that moment and you're more likely to enjoy it than if someone just came up to you randomly and said, hey, I made us a reservation. It's right now. Do you happen to be hungry and craving this kind of food?
And you might go to the restaurant again.
Well, exactly. If you're not craving sex, make sure that you're having
Hmm.
sex worth wanting because then you're going to be
Exactly.
so much more likely to come back to it.
Yeah, I want to ask one thing about responsive desire.
Mhm.
If we back, so you were saying we're going to, engage in something that's going to help us um, spark that desire.
Mhm.
But if we back up from that point, which a lot of women are at, which is I'm not thinking about it, how do we close the gap between I'm not thinking about it to being open to, okay, I'm going to do something intentional to get myself in the mood?
Right. This is such a fine line because when we talk about responsive desire, often what will happen is a partner or a woman will hear, okay, if I just have my neck kissed in the right way, that means that I have to have sex, right? And then we put the pressure on it. So it's really important, and what I'm working on a lot in couples therapy is that, let's say it's a kiss on the neck, that kiss on the neck needs to come with no pressure or expectation. That you might have 5 kisses on the neck, and one of them is a time that the context and the situation is conducive. So the challenge is if your partner comes up to you and kisses you on the neck, even if you're in the middle of doing something else and you're not in the mood for sex, you pause and you respond to it. That might mean that was a lovely kiss. Now go away, dear, because I'm in the middle of something else. That might mean that was a lovely kiss, and now I want to turn towards you and make out a little. I still don't want sex. I just want to make out a little because that feels good. And then maybe we start talking and it's a little erotic. I still don't want sex, right? The second we put pressure on it, it evaporates because then it doesn't feel like a desire, it feels like a must. And that's where this idea of safety around consent becomes really important, right? Are you in a relationship in which you can have the kiss on the neck, you can have the makeout, you can have the dirty talk, and then say, that was lovely, I feel satiated and I'm ready to move on to what's next? Or do you then get punished for that, whether it's with a conflict or you never want to have sex with me, or with just like a sad, mopey partner, or shame, right? Sometimes the punishment comes from inside the house. If there's ever a punishment or a negative consequence to opting out at any time, it's not true consent. And responsive desire requires the ability to lean in without pressure. And sometimes that can be a
Hmm,
really complicated dance.
that's really interesting. Hmm. Okay, I did not think about it that way. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
The punishment piece, because I think there's a lot of that going on, especially in couples who've been together for a long time.
Right. And that's where, like, really investigating for yourself, because
Hmm.
responsive desire can mean I'm seeking out pleasurable experiences, or it can mean I'm receptive to. And really often, when folks are in a relationship and where there's pressure to have sex, or they're feeling lacking for not having sex, or broken, what happens is that we develop kind of a bristle effect. Like anytime my partner reaches to me for affection of any kind, we shrug it off or there's an instant no. And the first challenge there is being receptive to those little things, is being more discerning about that no and allowing yourself to lean in to see if something sparks with the knowledge that if it doesn't, it's okay.
Mm. So this is where a sex therapist really comes in handy to help these couples navigate this. And
Yeah, it's complicated.
yeah, it is really complicated. Dr. Czar, if you could give every woman entering her 40s and 50s one actionable step to support sexual pleasure and resilience, what would it be?
Oh man, I have so many things that I'd like to say.
Okay,
Uh,
do three.
okay. I think the first thing I'd say is um, believe that you are deserving,
Mm,
that you get to. If we can shift from a place of I have to I get to, we open up ourselves to choice, first of all, that you don't have to. Again, you're never required to be sexual, but you get to if it's something that you want. It's accessible, it's there for you. And the first step towards that is feeling really deserving of pleasure in your life. And I want to say to every listener out there, even if it's not sex that's your pleasurable thing, you are deserving of pleasure. And if you can get to a point where you can really believe that, and again, access this selfish part of you, you get to investigate, what do I yearn for? What do I want? What feels pleasurable and erotic to me? And you get to do that until you die. There is no expiration date to sexuality. There is just not. So the actionable step, I would say, is just tell yourself that. Just remind yourself of that every day. You are deserving of pleasure. You are deserving of eroticism until you start to believe it. And if you're having experiences that are worth desiring, you will desire them. You will.
Makes a lot of sense. This is where sticky notes come into place. You can
Yes,
write
yes,
all
put
these.
the notes
When
all
I
over your mirror.
No, seriously, when I was going through my divorce, I wrote down really positive things about myself on sticky
Mhm.
notes and put them all over my house, inside drawers, inside cabinets, in my bathroom vanity, anywhere, anywhere that I was going to stumble upon, I would see
Mhm.
something positive about myself. And
Yes,
it,
it's such a
yeah,
beautiful way to override all of these messages
absolutely.
that tell us other things.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a great action step. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining the Health Trip podcast. This was a wonderful conversation, a conversation that needs to be spoken about more. And just knowing that people like you are there, sex therapists are there to help us navigate this time in our life. It's not, there's no end here. It's all open for discussion. It's open for exploration and open for pleasure. And that's very comforting to many of us.
Yes, thank you so much. I love conversations like this, and I'm so happy to be here.
And so where can people find you? Where are you active?
Sure, you can find me online. My website is rachelzartherapy.com. The practice in which I'm clinical director is Avid Intimacy, AVID intimacy.com. And you can also find me on social media. I'm on Instagram at rachelzartherapy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for your generosity and your expertise here. And everyone, thank you for joining the Health Trip podcast. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Lifestyle changes can be hard and overwhelming to make. By building your support team of functional medicine doctors, therapists, and health coaches, you can reach your optimal health goals. Be sure to check out my other podcasts. Until we meet again, stay healthy.